Hi, this is Mary Esther Gilbert, Nutritional Physiologist, and I got a question today about whether someone with arthritis should eat tomatoes. There are some mixed feelings, contradictory information out there about it among professionals and among the scientific community, but I'm going to take you through a search so that you can decide for yourselves why it's so controversial. First of all, I'm going to share my screen here with you, and the way I normally teach people is just to do a search online. Let me go to a new tab and I'll show you what I mean. So you can basically just type in tomatoes, joint pain, obviously I already typed it in, arthritis, and Science Journal. Now whenever you want to find something credible on the internet, what you need to do is whatever you search for, always type in the words Science Journal afterwards so that you don't come up with a lot of unprofessional opinions or incomplete or inaccurate advice and pseudoscience. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look here. And you'll have a lot of a layperson's information that someone can click on and just get some general information. But what I always encourage people to do is to find scientific studies that are archived in credible databases. The government archives contain a lot of the scientific studies that have been done on various botanicals and their healing properties or nutritional properties. And as you can see, there are other sites. Joint pain clinics. Sometimes clinics they can provide a very good explanation about whether to eat something or not and what their effects are on the body. So we can click on this, but I'd like to scroll down a little more and point out something else here. For the websites like Webmd, let's go ahead and click on that. A lot of people rely on Webmd, and over the many years that I've researched botanicals and their nutritional healing properties, I found that Webmd doesn't always have fully credible articles, and I'll tell you why. So what you want to do is you want to look at who puts websites out. Who are these people who put in Webmd? Are they selling anything, or are they just informational? So if they're selling anything, just get out of there, because they're just going to push their own products. And having examined products for over 40 years, I can tell you that most of those products are not adequate for your needs. So, but this one doesn't have. I know that I've been here before for many different occasions for researching things, but so you can basically just get some information. You'll get information about drugs and supplements and any health issues, and advice about how to live healthy and how to look after your pregnancy, and the news alerts. So this is a pretty general website. You're not going to get some real heavy, hard scientific data, but some authors who author articles like this, doesn't say who exactly does it, so it must be a team of employees who contribute to this website, and we don't know what their credentials are, but usually they are required to do some research enough so that they produce something that's very credible. So this is just some information about foods that contain a lot of anti-inflammatory properties. So I'm going to keep scrolling here just to show you. At the very bottom, usually, it'll list some sources where these authors of these articles found the information. So let's click on sources. And there's a certain format that people should use. That it's a formal way of listing where you got information. These are called references, reference sources. And in college, they teach you early on that when you're going to do some scientific research and put out a scientific paper, then you've got to have the right format that lists the scientific journal that you got the information from and the names of the researchers, the dates, the issue, the volume number of the publication, the name of the article, and all of that. So that has to be formatted into a specific way. So here you'll find that they didn't exactly format it that way, but at least they give you a list of where they got their information. So these do seem credible whenever you see a college, a prestigious university. That's usually something you should count on. Not always, depending on the funding. So it gets pretty political. You know, you have to truly dig in and see what was the funding of the particular study. Sometimes pharmaceutical companies with special interests will hire a team of scientists and you know, have a heavy influence on how the outcome of those studies are. So it can get pretty complicated. But for now, we just simply want to find the answer to, should people eat tomatoes when they have arthritis or joint pain or inflammation in the joints? And going through this list here, you can see that information was taken from a journal of clinical hypertension. It tells you the publishing date. So anytime a person gets their information from a scientific journal, you know, and they can probably, especially if they list other journals, sometimes when science has to replicate a study to verify that one outcome of one study was credible. So, and here you have Linus Pauling Institute. I know for a fact that this is a very, very well-established institute, and so their information about nutrition is pretty phenomenal. You know, it's pretty first-rate. Another couple of journals here. So all in all, this particular article at Webmd is okay. I've seen comparable websites like Webmd that appear to be nicely authoritative and appear to give you scientific information, but when you look a little deeper, you don't know where their information came from. And unless you've been trained, like I have for 40 years, to know what to look for, then it's likely that you just might get some misinformation. So it's important to know how to research. So I just wanted to make that first point before we go on. Okay, so let's see what else the search engine turned up here. ResearchGate.net. Let's see what ResearchGate is all about. Are they selling anything, first of all? It looks like it is a reference textbook. Okay. Mentions a chapter, you know, the title of the book. And they just took a little bit of a summarization, which is called an abstract, of what the book is about and what it discusses. So sometimes books are pretty good, and this was written by a scientist, Masoud Parvez, from the Pabna University of Science and Technology, and also, it looks like a magazine, a scientific journal, not a book. Or maybe they took it looks like it was taken from a book, and they wrote it up in a scientific journal, and you can tell by the DOI number. All scientific journals, articles have to reference this universal number that all scientists all over the world recognize and can look up any kind of specific article by the DOI. And this was also written by a doctor, and he was from the University of Asia Pacific. So this looks like a pretty credible source of information. They don't give you much here on this webpage. All right, so that didn't really tell you anything about a lot of information about whether you should eat tomatoes if you have inflammation, although this summarizes it pretty much. So they always have to explain what the disease is that they are testing. And they are also nice enough to list the foods that are made worse. So sugar, fats, salt, caffeine, nightshade plants like the eggplant and tomatoes. people with severe arthritis or inflammatory conditions are better off to not consume the foods that are pretty strong when it comes to clearing out the inflammation in the body, and that's what tomatoes and eggplants and potatoes and other nightshade plants generally do. They do contain a nutrient, not really a nutrient, it's a phytochemical called solanine, and you find that when potatoes start turning green. Never eat a green tomato. They are extremely toxic, and they can severely aggravate arthritis symptoms. Green tomatoes for the same thing. They've got the solanine forming in there, and once the tomatoes are ripened, fully ripened, then usually they have other phytochemicals that have formed in the phytonutrients that are very beneficial for your health and are anti-inflammatory. So it counters the solanine and outweighs it often. So it depends on how badly your condition is, according to some of the research that you can come up with. Now that I've shown you how to dig in and find what's out there as far as what scientific data, what studies have shown for these types of foods. So, you can eat red meat if you're not a vegetarian, but you have to balance your nutrition. You can't just have red meat, because if red meat sits in the stomach, and you don't have the wonderful digestive enzymes from the plant foods, tomatoes and peppers, all those help contribute to the digestion of these huge protein molecules from meat. So it's important to balance your meals and eat plenty of raw foods, especially if you're going to eat a fatty meal or a meal that is a little heavy on the meat side. So it's all a matter of balance, providing your body with all the full range of all the nutrients your body would ever need to digest and absorb all the nutrients in the food that your body's digesting. Nutrition is a vast science, and a lot of people don't realize just how complex it really is. All right, so let's move on to another link. So far, in the research that I've done in the years that I've been researching foods and coming across the science about tomatoes and other nightshades, there's never really anything definite that says stay away from tomatoes. A lot of commercials, even MDs who commercialize their products, they tell you, don't eat tomatoes, it's so bad for you. But they don't really present you with the science. And once you look into the science, you'll see that a lot of that is advertising hype. Unless, and this is very specific, unless someone has a severe case of arthritis or they experience swelling. So that means that there are a lot of other nutritional factors, nutrient factors that are missing in a person's diet, or they're eating the wrong foods that are actually the culprits. The tomatoes, they'll go in and they'll clean house. They'll, a person who eats a lot of white sugar, white flour, and a lot of sweets, and chemical beverages, all those things contribute to inflammation. And there are little crystals that form in the joints. They're very sharp, they're very jagged, they're microscopic, but they cause the pain and inflammation in the joints. And a lot of people, when they have these kinds of joint pain and this kinds of swelling, then it's different than if your cartilage is all worn down and you're experiencing pain because you've got so much worn down that your bones in your knees are rubbing together. There's no cushion. That's something different. And but when you have an inflammatory response from tomatoes, say, and you've been eating the wrong food, and you've got uric acid crystals stuck in your joints, tomatoes will go in there and they'll help dissolve that. They're high in vitamin C. They're enzyme active, and enzyme active means you are eating raw foods, because once you cook something, enzymes are destroyed at 120 degrees Fahrenheit. So even lightly steaming or stir frying, things like that will destroy the enzymes. So you need those enzymes to break down the uric acid crystals, not just from tomatoes, but from the anti-inflammatory effects of peppers and citrus fruits, things like that. So enzyme-active foods are very important for people with swollen joints and uric acid crystals, pain and inflammation in the joints. And those are all lumped into different forms of arthritis. So osteoarthritis is when the bone is worn down, so that's something different, but you still experience the pain. And so tomatoes will probably actually help because of the enzymes in there that help the body build up the bone and the cartilage and things like that. Many doctors and the advertising hype, misinformation out there will tell you that that cannot be rebuilt. Well, I'm here to tell you that when I had my practice for 30 years and I had clients with these types of problems, they were one of the easiest things to fix. So with the right nutrients and a well-balanced diet, the person can build up their cartilage and rebuild their bone so they can get rid of their osteoarthritis. As far as other types of arthritis, that's easily dissolved because the uric acid crystals are disassembled and the fluid and circulation is restored back into the joints. So tomatoes aren't the bad guys. They've been given a bad rap, you know. But if a person who is very, very, who does have a severe case, they want to ease into eating these types of high enzyme, high in vitamin C types of foods. So the citric acid in tomatoes also are very cleansing and help dissolve uric acid crystals. Uric acid crystals, it has a lot to do with a circulatory problem. Your body excretes uric acid when you urinate, but when that gets misdirected and gets deposited in the joint, that's when the problems start. And it's usually because of a dietary imbalance over time, especially when someone is eating all the foods that contribute to inflammation. So like I said, processed foods and processed refined sugars and the white flours and the white rice and everything that's been stripped of the fiber and minerals and things like that that contribute to healthy joints. So you want to distinguish the difference between why tomatoes are good for you and why tomatoes could be potentially inflammatory because you're already in an inflammatory state, and you need to ease into eating tomatoes so that they don't make the cleaning house process too painful. So sometimes it's just a temporary thing. So tomatoes are extremely nutritious. They contain phytonutrients that are anti-cancer, antimicrobial. So plant foods are extremely important, especially those that are high in vitamin C, like tomatoes and peppers. And they contain the phytonutrients that reduce inflammation. Okay? All right, so I hope you understand the difference between why someone should eat tomatoes and why someone else should not eat tomatoes. Okay, moving on to just going to show you just a couple of more things here. So you have to be careful where you get your information because it can be very contradictory. Okay, let's see what Harvard Health, Harvard University has to say. Even the universities sometimes contradict themselves, so you really have to dig into just the scientific research. So here's a person who is a registered dietitian, LVN, JD, CDE, don't know what that means. I mean, there are so many types of titles out there that can get quite intricate. So this is written by Miss Antonoro from the Brigham and Women's Hospital, a Harvard-affiliated hospital. So let's see what she says about tomatoes. And she's talking about being overweight and the wear and tear type of arthritis, which is the osteoarthritis that I mentioned. And let's see, so she's talking about types of fats that are very anti-inflammatory. So anyone with any kind of arthritis needs to eat the right types of fats. Okay. Let's see, let's just keep going here. Vitamin D is important, fruits and vegetables. So she's not really talking about staying away from tomatoes at all. And if I couldn't find the word tomatoes in there, we can do a Control F and just type in the word tomato. And you'll see that there is, as you can see up here on the right, 1 out of 1. So that means it only found the word tomato once in this whole thing. And they're just talking about the nightshade plants. So this isn't really, so okay, let's see. This sentence right here, it's important. And you have to really understand it, what it's really saying. It says the premise is that avoiding these foods eases joint pain and inflammation. Medical evidence does not support this claim. And looking through the scientific data, through all of these different scientific studies, I have yet to come up with a study that concludes tomatoes are completely bad for you if you have any kind of arthritis. So people don't really know how to pick this out, though, because they don't have the science behind them. They haven't read all of the scientific articles and have not come up empty like I did, you know, as far as should you eat tomatoes or not. So when you pick this apart, it says that the premise is that avoiding these foods eases joint pain. A premise is not a fact. A premise is not a scientific fact, and it has not necessarily been verified. Medical evidence does not support this claim. So medical evidence could mean did a lot of doctors over time report that the person was eating tomatoes, and so therefore it caused the inflammation in their arthritis? No. So nobody's saying that definitely don't eat them. You know, they say approach it with caution. So just like I did, you know, I just went ahead through the years and came across articles that talked about, you know, why tomatoes affect some people and why they don't. And here's a website called Helpline. Let's see how credible Helpline is. Looks pretty credible, doesn't it? Okay. And I do not like cookies, so I'm not going to talk to them. All right, so this article was written by a medical doctor and, medically reviewed by a medical doctor, written by Aaliyah Carey. She doesn't list her credentials. The author does not. So, eliminating tomatoes and other food myths about arthritis. Okay, so they're claiming that it's a myth, right? So let's click over on tomatoes and see what they say. Pity the poor tomato. Long thought poisonous, it's often maligned for making arthritis worse. This is because tomatoes naturally produce a toxin called solanine, and that's the toxin I mentioned earlier that also is formed in tomatoes that give them the green potatoes that give them the green color. So green tomatoes also have solanine. This toxin is believed to contribute to inflammation, swelling, and joint pain. Now that toxin has definitely been proven to definitely cause, you know, this kind of problem. So just stay away from green tomatoes and green potatoes. However, it goes on to say no relationship between arthritis pain and tomatoes, or any of its cousins like potato and eggplant, has been found. So in other words, no study so far has gone in and tested test subjects to see if tomatoes or potatoes or eggplants have caused pain in their joints. And I have yet to come up with, in my searches, you know, has anyone done any studies on it? Well, that remains to be seen. There are literally thousands upon thousands of studies out there in hundreds upon hundreds of scientific journals. So doing a quick search for you here didn't turn something up right away. And if something is prominent, if a study has been done repeatedly and something has been found to be true, then you'd see the studies come right up on the search engines. That's been my experience. But because we have to keep digging deeper and deeper, you know, it's likely that what this website is claiming is true. So how did this myth get started? It says the leaves of tomato plants are poisonous to protect the fruit from animals and fungi. All right, nobody eats the leaves really of tomato plants, or unless by accident, you know. As for the potato, avoid any with green spots. These green spots contain toxins that might make you sick. Okay, so that's putting it lightly. They don't go into the science of it. This is addressing the lay public. Okay, and then go on to other foods. Okay, so I'm still not satisfied. If I do research for someone, I want to know what's going on. So let's go on with the search. So here's one down here that says Nightshades and Arthritis Mayo Clinic. Mayo Clinic is pretty reliable, I have found. They put out some pretty good stuff. So let's click on their website. See what it says about tomatoes. So there's a video here. Now here's a good point that the Mayo Clinic makes. Can avoiding foods like potato chips and pizza help ease your arthritis pain? Maybe. Okay, I have found many studies. Well, let's see what Dr. Davis says. Some foods can increase inflammation levels and contribute to symptoms of arthritis, especially really fatty foods, simple sugars or carbohydrates, lots of salt or salty foods. Okay, so yes, everything that I've said so far, all points to the same information. Obviously, the science has been resolved there for what causes inflammation in the body. Refined carbohydrates, and too much fat, too much of the wrong fats, I might add, which is the fried foods. Those types of heated oils, solidified oils, like margarine and shortening, those are extremely, they clog all of the circulatory pathways in the body, not just the blood vessels, and they do harden the arteries. They collect plaques in the blood vessels, but they also clog the circulatory systems in all of the organs, and especially in the lymph nodes and the skin cells and the liver. All sorts of things are happening when someone puts the fried oils or solidified oils in their diet. So you want to stay away from those foods too. And definitely they all cause a inflammatory response in the body that can lead to arthritis. So I totally agree with Dr. Davis. So some of the symptoms, when you've got clogged systems, they're going to back up and just prevent the circulation to go through, the nutrients to be delivered, the oxygen to be delivered. They're going to disrupt all kinds of things that the cells produce and manufacture. So you're going to, it says, include swollen and achy joints, discomfort, and pain. So that's what I have found in the 40 years of I've been helping people get rid of inflammatory responses in the body, including arthritis. When they cut out the junk, then their system will restore themselves and the inflammation is reduced, and the pain, especially arthritis, like I said earlier, is one of the easiest things to fix. So then he goes on to talk about medications, and medications aren't nutrients. They will not help your body restore itself to its proper functioning. But I'm not a medical doctor, and I have never told anyone to get off the meds. I've just helped them improve their diet. They go back to their doctors, and their doctors just, wow, you're doing great. Keep doing what you're doing. I try sending doctors information, and they just don't want to look at it. They aren't trained to understand that nutrients are the fundamental reason the body can heal itself from all sorts of ailments. That has been my experience in the last 40 years, and also it's scientifically backed. That claim that I just made is definitely scientifically backed. Linus Pauling, 2 times Nobel Peace Prize winner, said that 99.9% of health issues can be fixed with nutrients. A lot of the ailments are due to nutrient deficiencies. And so I have found that to be true. All right, so I prefer to look for scientific studies, because there are thousands of them out there, and they are the ultimate when it comes to the most credible information you can find, because so much work has been put into proving if something is true or false. And of course, one study isn't going to make it universal law, but when you have many, many studies over time that test the same things and have the same outcome, then you can be pretty sure that that's that's factual data. All right, so let's look up nightshades and arthritis. Oops, I forgot to put in Science Journal after that search. But if I didn't, like in this case, you won't really see. Well, you've got Helpline, and then you start getting other websites that are not as credible. There's a blog. That's someone's blog. They may or may not be qualified to, or science trained to say what they're saying. Shake vegetables, medical news today. That's usually pretty good. You can look that up, and they usually list their science data as well. So let's take a look here. And this is the kind of research I do for people. Someone asks me a question, and my memory, it just has been years since I talked about tomatoes or looked up anything on tomatoes. It's been about 10 years. So I just went online and started looking it up, and it's all coming back to me now. There's just so many nutrients, phytochemicals, and so many different types of biochemical pathways that happen in the body that even the most experienced and the most educated one sometimes has to go back and verify their knowledge. And I always double check myself just to make sure that I'm giving people the right information. So this one talks about solanine again, and so it just becomes a little bit redundant. This is why I prefer to go to the scientific studies. But the studies, sometimes they're so old, they've been verified a long time ago that it may not be available. Let's hope it is. So again, there's that blog, Medical News Today. Here's a government database. Let's see if they talk about tomatoes. Let's see. Well, my search came up with from nightshade, so let's just substitute that for tomatoes and see what we come up with. So here we go. Here's right away it comes up on the database in the National Institutes of Health government database. So they house pretty much the scientific studies done from all over the world. So here's a really good example of the kinds of scientific journals that I go into and take a look. So this one is called Managing Rheumatoid Arthritis with Dietary Interventions. See, these studies can get pretty specific. So if they don't mention tomatoes, they probably do mention tomatoes because it came up in the search engine according to what I typed in. So let me do a Control F and see if the word tomato comes up. And they're talking about a type of organic acid that's found in the body, but it's present in these types of fruits and vegetables. So we just jumped right into the middle here. So let's go back up and see what this article is about. The introduction is a pretty good indication of what the article is about. Here's a knee joint. And they're talking about the cells, the immune system, the synovial fluids, which is the fluids in the knee. So they go into different things, and it may or may not be what we're looking for. But let's see what the introduction says. So they took the abstract, and let's see if they mention tomatoes. If not, we'll move on, So I'm scanning this. I'm so used to looking at these that I can definitely tell that they're not talking about tomatoes necessarily. And I'm scanning and I'm scanning. All this stuff is very familiar. It'll take you a while to learn the scientific terminology, but it's really worth doing. After a time, when you've looked at enough of these, you'll be able to see what their testing procedures are and what their outcomes are and how they report it. Okay, so this one doesn't talk about tomatoes. Let's just go on to another one. I'm going to go on to at least one more. Hopefully we'll find it. And again, Tomatoes and Arthritis Science Journal. All right, so They're always talking about rheumatoid arthritis, arthritis.org. Now, organizations are usually pretty responsible. They look into the scientific studies, and they report from those scientific studies you just saw me look into. So let's see, they're not selling any products. Good. That's the first thing I look at. And so they're talking about what's good for you, but they don't really talk about, well, let's go to nightshade vegetables, see what they say about tomatoes. So they're saying good things about them. See, nightshade vegetables, including eggplant, tomatoes, red bell peppers, and potatoes, are disease-fighting powerhouses that boast maximum nutrition for minimal calories. They also contain solanine, a chemical that has been branded the culprit in arthritis pain. So it's not the tomatoes, it's the green tomatoes because they contain solanine. All right? So they're saying there's no scientific evidence to suggest that nightshades trigger arthritis flares. So like I said earlier, the human body is extremely complex, and our nutritional physiology is extremely complex. How the body uses these phytochemicals in plants, these beneficial plant chemicals in plants are numerous. It's not going to follow the same biochemical pathway if it determines in its hierarchy, intelligent hierarchy of needs where these nutrients need to go, or what inflammatory response is going to occur. Okay, so how far gone your health is will determine whether or not you can eat a tomato. So if you're pretty healthy and have even eating a green tomato sometimes may not hurt you. But solanine is a pretty powerful chemical. So, it gets dissipated when the tomato gets ripened. With potatoes, of course, it's the opposite. If they're exposed to sunlight too long after they've been picked, then they start turning green. So solanine is either direction. So for tomatoes, however, if you eat the tomato when it's nice and ripe and you have stayed away from inflammatory foods mentioned earlier, then you should be, staying away from those inflammatory foods in the first place is going to help you reduce your arthritis problem. But when you eat enzyme-active foods high in vitamin C and high in citric acid, like the citrus fruits and tomatoes and hot peppers, that's not going to be a problem. Just introduce them to your diet slowly. And, if you really love those foods, try to eat them raw for a while so you can get the enzymes to help you break down those uric acid crystals that form in the joints. Okay, so tomatoes, like I said earlier on one of those other websites, tomatoes get a bad rap. And a lot of medical people don't dig into the science enough, and so they try to be nutritional physiologists, and they just aren't trained. They get like 1 hour of nutritional instructions in medical school, from what I hear. Maybe nowadays, I think more doctors are becoming more and more aware of nutritional healing. I know my clients' doctors were always very impressed with how their patients got well. They were perplexed sometimes, but they did acknowledge the fact that, okay, this person started eating better and these symptoms went away. There's a definite correlation there and plenty of scientific evidence to back that up. So, so in answer to the question, can you eat tomatoes when you have arthritis? Clean up your diet, drink plenty of water, nice spring bottled water, or filtered properly through a microfilter, something like the Berkey, water filtration unit. Heck, they even come in sports bottles. They come in really small gallon-and-a-half units, or you can buy the much larger units that you can take to places where the water is unsafe to drink. So they've been tested out in the field throughout the world. So they're pretty thorough. Most water filtration units do not clean the water to that extent. You'll still have the less expensive units aren't able to filter out the micro-filtration of toxic chemicals and things. So just a little aside there as far as why you should drink plenty of water, and do not drink distilled water and do not drink tap water. Okay, so environmental pollutants are in the tap water, and you do not want that to aggravate and inflame your joints. All right, so I guess that's it for now. And just introduce them into your diet slowly but surely, and clean up your diet, drink plenty of water, and that should do it. You should start feeling better, within a couple of weeks. Be consistent. Nourish your body properly, and it knows what to do. Give your body the plant materials and the proteins and the right types of fats and the whole food carbohydrates, no refined foods. Just if it's not freshly harvested or if it's not freshly slaughtered, don't eat it. Your body will love you for it. And arthritis is one of the first things that is fixed when someone has inflamed joints. All right. Again, this is Mary Esther Gilbert. Thank you for joining me, and take care of yourself. Thank you.